Hello everyone, welcome to another very exciting tutorial. In this tutorial I'm going to show you how you can create this cool animation and also how to create these nice shadows for these circles moving around, right? So without further ado, let's get started. As always, I'm going to go to kotus.com/codity and I am going to create a new prototype. So I'll start with creating a container div. So a div with class container, and within that, I'm going to create a div with class circle. Going to my CSS, I am going to center my container in the middle of my view by setting it to position absolute and left 50% and top 50%. And then for my circle, I'm going to give it a width of 15 pixel and height of 15 pixel. Background of, let's say, let me just give the body a background of maybe blue violet. And then I'm giving my circle a background of white, giving it a border radius of 50% to make it round and nice. And obviously set the position to absolute because we want to move it around freely in the page. Now what I'm going to do, I am going to create an animation using keyframes, call it anim, and then I'm going to give my animation on 0% of it transform origin because I want this to move like this. So I'm going to give it a transform origin of maybe 400 pixel, 400%, and on y-axis 50%. So it ends up somewhere over here. And then obviously I want the transform rotate to be 0. And then going to 50% of my animation, I will still preserve the transform origin, but I will change the transform to be 360 degree, right? I just want to show you how it looks like. I am going to use my animation called anim. I'll give it a 10 seconds so we have a big timing over here, and you can see how it animated from there to there. So the next step is that now I want the animation, as you can see over here, so it goes here and then here. So in order to create the second round of it, I'm going to set 50.1%. I'll change the transform origin here to minus 300 this time, so the transform origin ends up being somewhere here, and then I will set the rotation to be 0 degree again, right? And going to 100%, I'll preserve the transform origin, but this time again I'm gonna give the rotation minus 360 degree, right? So you can see how this guy animates from here and then over here. But there is an easing going on because by default the animation is ease out. I'm going to make it linear and I'll set it to be infinite. So if I change the duration to something like 2 seconds, you'll see that I have this cool animation going on. Because we had 3 circles, I'm going to add 2 more of these in my HTML, and then I am going to choose the second circle using the nth child pseudo animal, second one, and then I'll say animation delay to be 0.3 seconds, right? And then the same way for the third circle, and I'll set these to 6, right? So you can see that we have this cool animation going on, but if you notice, it basically starts one by one, but I want the animation to already started before time 0. So I'm going to set minus and minus on this. So when it starts, it's already there. So we have this cool animation. Now we want to go for the shadow part. The shadow part is actually pretty easy. What I'm going to do is that for now I am going to say display none on the second one and third one, so I can work on one here. What I'm going to do, I am going to actually put the circle div over here in a container. So I'm going to create a div with circle container class, and then I'll just copy and paste that within that, right? Now I am going to give my circle container, so circle container, I'm going to give it a width of, let's say, 400 pixel and height of 200 pixel. And then just to see how it looks like, I'm going to just give it a background red, right? So you can see this is kind of the container, but I need to center it. So I'm going to give it a position absolute. Then I'll set the left to be 50%, top to be 50%, and then transform, translate minus 50% and minus 50%, right? So it nicely ends up in the center of my page. But now I have to center the circle, which is supposedly within this container. As you can see in my HTML, it's within this container. What I need to do is actually, since the circle is already absolute, I'll give it a left of 50% and top of 50%, right? So you can see it ends up in the container. Now for the shadows, I'm going to use the pseudo element after on this container class, right? And in order to do that, I'll say circle container, and then using after pseudo element, I'll give, obviously I don't want any text content on it. I'll give it a width of maybe 20 pixel, height of 5 pixel, position absolute, obviously, because I want to move it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say background maybe black. You can see it ends up over here. And then border radius 50%. So you can see we have this nice and round. And then I'll set the bottom, since I set the position to be absolute, I'll set the bottom to 0. Right? So it ends up over here. And just to center it in my page, in my container here, is left 50%. So we have this set up already there. Now, in order to follow this animation, this is something that we're gonna fake, right? So I'm gonna create a new animation using keyframes and call it shadow, and then within that shadow, so as you just to show you how many times I have to set the shadow position, I'm going to give my animation a very big number, right? So you can see that. Let's just start over. I'm going to show you how many iterations do I need to set. Let's say it comes here 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5, 6, 7, and 8, right? So as you know, we have 100% on our animation. I have to divide it to 8 and then move this shadow around in a nice manner to kind of represent the shadow of the placement of this circle, right? So dividing 100 to 8, it's gonna end to 12.5%. So starting from 0, I have 12.5% over here. Then after that, adding 12.5 to this, it's going to be 25. Then it's going to be 37.5%. Then it's going to be 50%. Again, it's going to be 62.5%. And it's going to be 75%. Then 87.5%, right? And then we have 100%. So you can see I divided 100% by 8, which leads to these numbers, right? So on 0%, obviously it's over there and it's the 0% of my animation. On 12.5%, let's just translate this to maybe, I don't know, maybe 50%, 50 pixel. right? And I'm gonna just give, because this is my shadow, I'm gonna just define my animation to be shadow 10 seconds, the same duration as my circle animation, make it linear and make it infinite, right? So the same thing. So you can see it kind of follows up until 12%. Then I'm gonna do transform, translate it to 110 pixel maybe. So let's see, it kind of follows it nicely. Then it comes back, so the same transform as I defined on 12 will end up over here. And then on 50%, obviously the transform is 0, right? So as you can see, it kind of follows this and then sort of comes back. Don't worry if it doesn't follow exactly the same place. When you add the speed to the animation, that is not visible. That's why I meant we're gonna fake the shadow animation here. And then okay, so you can see that it goes up here, it comes back, then it starts and goes to 62.5. Now I'm gonna transform, I'm gonna translate it to maybe translate it to minus 50%. And then here I am going to say maybe 100, sorry, this should be pixel. So this one following the lead on the other side of it, it's going to be minus 110 pixel. Coming back again, it's going to be transform, translate minus 50 pixel, and again here obviously it goes to 0, right? So if you notice this, you'll see that the shadow kind of follows the path of the circle, right? Not bad. So the other cool thing that we can add to make it more realistic is that, as you can see, the circle changes the distance to the shadow, right? So over here it's pretty close, here is center, it goes up. So what we can do is that here when it goes to 12.5%, you can actually use the scale to make it smaller, right? So here it gets smaller, this is almost center, and here again it becomes big, right? So I can say scale maybe 0.4%. So you can see when it goes to distance, it gets smaller, and it comes closer to the shadow, it gets bigger. We can use the same scenario over here as well. So I'm going to set the scale to 0.6 over here, and here when it comes back, I'll set the scale to something like maybe 1.4, right? The same. So it gets smaller, it gets bigger here, it's something like smaller, and then here it gets bigger, right? So again, don't worry if the shadow doesn't follow up, because if you change the duration to a smaller value, it actually doesn't really look bad. All right, so we have this. We're gonna work a little bit on our shadows. Maybe give it an opacity to be 0.6. You can see that it's now a little bit nicer, looks more like shadowy. You can even add a filter if you want, like a blur with 1 pixel. It kind of makes it like blurred a little bit as well if you want, but that's not what I want to do. Maybe changing this to a little bit smaller, make it nicer. Yep. So now I'm going to remove the red background of the circle container, and you can see that it kind of follows this. And now if I remove the duration from, change the duration from 2 to, let's say 10 to 2 for both shadow and my animation, you'll see that it looks like as if it kind of follows that, right? So that little bit lagging behind is compensatable, you know, when you add the animation. Now I'm gonna go to my HTML, and I'll put the second and third circle in its containers as well, pretty much copying this and replacing the third and second. So this is the first, and this, so we have 1, 2, and 3. And going back to here, what I need to do now is that now the circle nth child 2 and circle nth child 3 doesn't work because they are in their containers. I'm going to set the container and then the circle within that. The same way on the second one, container, and then the circle within that, just removing the displays here. You can see that we have this very nice set over here. Now I'm going to use the again the pseudo element nth child on the container itself to change the animation delay for the shadows. So I'm going to use this, but I'm going to use nth child second, right? And then after, I want the animation delay to be 0.3 seconds, the same way I did for my circle. So you can see the second one is following as well, and then I'm going to use the third one, and then I'm going to give it the same delay as I gave it on my circle container circle. So as you can see, we have this very cool animation with the shadows that follow up. Now if you want the shadows to be further away or closer, you can always play with the circle container by giving it a bigger height, let's say 400. You can see that the distance of the shadow gets further away, or even closer, not really that much, doesn't look good, but maybe like this, it kind of gets it closer, right? So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I'll put the link to this prototype in the description. Go ahead and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and share and like this tutorial if you liked it. And I hope to see you next time in the next tutorial. Have a good day and night. Goodbye.